There's a church stage design trend that I've been seeing pop up more and more lately, and this church stage design trend is different from virtually every other because it's focused more on setting the stage for preaching rather than music. So stick around, and I'll share with you a number of examples of churches implementing this kind of setup, and you'll learn about the missional reasoning behind this type of configuration as well. Well, hey there, I'm Brady Shearer from Pro Church Tools, and if we're just meeting for the first time, this channel is all about helping you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. So please consider subscribing. You can also hit the little church bell to turn on notifications. We publish new videos every Tuesday and Thursday, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Let's begin by taking a look at two influential preachers. First, this is Rich Wilkerson Jr., pastor of VOO Church in Miami, Florida. And second, this is T.D. Jakes, pastor of the Potter's House in Dallas, Texas. And here they are each preaching on a Sunday morning at their respective churches. And here's what I notice when I look at these clips. Do you notice how there are people on the stage with them as they preach? For Rich, there are 2 rows of 8 people seated in chairs behind him. And then for Bishop Jakes, he's got 2 rows of 4 on each side of the stage. Now, obviously, this type of setup is fairly easy to achieve. We're talking about a dozen or so chairs, maybe a riser of some kind if you want the second row to be perched a bit higher than the first. But I think what's more interesting here is the why. Why configure your stage in this way? To what end? Well, this setup exists because these churches are being intentional about creating a preaching culture of participation. That means note-taking, verbal affirmation, it means focused attention. And this value, this distinctive, even informs their stage design. Think about it this way. In the same way the worship team at a church sets the pace for the congregation with their energy and focus, these individuals seated on the platform are setting the tone for those seated in the pews. And by placing these people in clearly visible positions on stage, these churches are establishing culture in nonverbal ways using the physical space they're in. If you've ever served on a worship team at church, whether that be playing a musical instrument or singing, you've likely been instructed in some way or another on how to conduct yourself on stage. And maybe it's as clear-cut as a dress code, what's appropriate to wear and what's not, or maybe it's a bit more abstract and had more to do with your countenance and posture. I know for me, it wasn't just enough to play my instrument with skill. Of equal importance was the energy I'm bringing to the stage. Because at my church, when we worship God through music, we want it to be exciting and filled with passion, and we want it to be a congregation-wide experience where everyone is invited to participate. And this value informs the songs we pick, the way we mix on the soundboard, and our lighting configurations. But now imagine if we paired all that with a group of worshipers on stage that looked inattentive, tired, and disinterested. It would completely undermine everything we're trying to accomplish, because here is the underlying truth. The presence you exert from the stage will more often than not be mirrored by your congregation in the pews. And especially if you're in a season of establishing culture and trying to build momentum, it's highly imperative for you to be intentional about demonstrating that culture and not just talking about it. So let's get back to this stage design configuration. The important things to look at are the ways in which these individuals seated on the stage are responding to the message. There's note-taking, there's verbal affirmation, there's applause, there's focused attention on the person that's preaching. And every one of these things is non-verbally communicating to the people in the pews that this is how we worship God through preaching at this church. And so it's okay for you to do the same thing. Heck, we encourage you to behave this way because for our church, we think this is the best way to be an active participant in the preaching and not just a passive spectator. Similarly, as we worship God through music at this church, we're going to sing at the top of our lungs, we'll raise our hands, we'll clap, we'll dance, and you'll see that modeled first from the stage as the worshipers on the platform set the pace for the rest of the congregation. And please, it's important that you don't get bogged down in the minutia or specifics of this. It may not suit your church's culture or values to be vocal during the preaching, just as it may not suit your church's culture or values to raise hands during worship. Every church is different. So don't get worked up if this is or is not the precise embodiment of your ideal church, because the takeaway here is the same for all of us. Using the physical space that our churches embody and considering how it's working for or against the mission of our churches, how it's working for or against the cultures we're trying to build. And that can take many different forms, as it should, because different expressions of worship are important. But the good news is this. You may not have the most expensive lights, and perhaps your sound system is due for an upgrade. Maybe you're working with a limited budget. That's okay, because the most important element of church stage design is the people on your platform. Because as we sit in the pews, we're picking up every verbal and especially nonverbal cue that we see from the folks on stage. And there's no amount of physical set design or lighting that can overshadow that. pun intended. So consider the culture and atmosphere you want to establish at your church, and then ask yourself, how are we setting the pace for the rest of our congregation with our physical presence from the stage? And thanks so much for watching. If you liked this video, please consider subscribing and make sure to hit the thumbs up as well. We appreciate your time.